And so it wasn't really you know a challenging trip for the most part, except for the sick part. It was pretty easy. And I'd really like to have people who are interested, join me on a trip there. I think you would get incredibly blessed, and it would be a huge blessing for these guys. I know they must have told me 100 times how much it meant to them, my coming there, and how for many of them it sort of legitimized what we were doing, that they could see it was, oh, this is a real thing. And so all in all, it was very, 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 very good. Are there any questions? No? Oh, Steve Phyllis.
Hey, John, what are the relations like between the Muslims and the Christians there? You were saying a certain time of morning, they would call people to prayer. The Islamic uh, thing would be rung to call people to prayer. How's the relationship between Christians and
What's the number
Muslims?
between Christians and Muslims there?
Well, it's predominantly a Christian country, and not a ton of Muslims. Um, the further north you go, the more Muslims there are. Um, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of issues between Christians and Muslims. The bigger issue there is tribalism. So they don't have racism there; they have tribalism. And so if you're a member like of the Teso tribe, well, those Bugandans, yeah, we know how they are, kind of thinking, right? And and they do struggle with that a little bit. Even amongst, really committed Christians, they can have prejudices against other tribes.
Okay.
But I have a
There,
question. I have a
there,
question before you go. John, how understanding tribalism and understanding how this works, how do A2K move into this community and be effective?
So, being outsiders, they don't feel the same way. They have a lot of respect for Americans, especially, and um, they, um, they're they are aware of that the tribalism really isn't okay, you know, from God's perspective, and we talked about it. We had both, sort of offline talks where maybe we're at lunch or something and we would talk about it, as well as I talked about it in at least one of the sessions, about how, for Christians there just isn't, that's not a thing. It's we can't view people by their, their tribe or whatever. We have to, you know we're called to self-sacrificial love, and my impression was that, these guys all really, really get that, and that they're they recognize that they can kind of fall into that mode of thinking, and that they need to not to. Um,
And John, another thing is too is that as we look back at Israel, Israel was a very tribal nation and got into a lot of problems because of their tribal understanding and their tribal uh, setup. Because who's the strongest tribe gets to make the decisions as to who's who and what's what. Uh, Tribalism has not totally gone away in even in America because we have a tribalism type attitude, especially I can tell you about my family. My father had like 10 or 11 brothers and sisters, and within that tribe, there's a type of tribalism type thing when we come to family reunions and who's going to set this thing up and who's going to be the leader and who's are the ones uh this making kind of like the policy that the tribal is going to follow. This is something that's uh it's kind of foreign and put down, but it's still a thing that we need to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, it's not different than, I mean, here in the US, I think we have sort of a political tribalism, and where you have, you know, people on the left or people on the right that look at the other side and, have, maybe even all the way to contempt towards, people on the other side of the political spectrum. And, you know, that's, as far as God's concerned, that's not different than being a racist. And if you've got contempt for another human being, that's a serious problem. And as we have a kind of tribalism here. It's not really tribes, but where, from, different parts of the country, or, different backgrounds, those kinds of things. There, it's, long history of these kinds of things with these tribes. They're still sort of tribal kings in Uganda. And so um but they're aware of it. I mean, it's not like they're being racist towards each other and they're just not even aware of it. They're aware of it, and they know it's not okay. And that's just sometimes, when it kind of biases run deep, you may not recognize it all the time. And one of the interesting things that happened over the course of the time that we were there, so Fiona is Buganda, and the generally speaking, the Atasso people view the Bugandans as just all they care about is money. That's the way that they see them. They're very materialistic, and they just care about money and that kind of thing. And so they didn't. This was the first time for Fiona to meet all these people as well, and so they got to really get to know Fiona, and just everybody fell in love with Fiona, and she's just really, really wonderful. And it kind of, I think there was a little bit of shaming that occurred, where they felt bad because they had kind of felt like, oh, she's Buganda, and then they meet her and they realize how wonderful she is and how committed she is, and it's like, oh yeah, we can't think that way. So, um, we're Chris and I have worked very hard to preach the gospel, and send a message of, no, we have to obey Christ and we have to do things right and things like that. And we're not going to be about money. We're going to be about the word and living God's ways and things like that. And so over the past, year or two, what that's meant is, um I always like using the sheep and goat analogy. The sheep have stayed and the goats have left. And so the pastors that are there, for the most part, they are very on board with the idea of, the kingdom being God's reign and rule, and you got to live in obedience to God's commandments and things like that. So it just, we're what we're trying to do there is build a really, really good foundation. Instead of, it would be very easy for us to go in there and just grow and grow and grow very, very rapidly. It would be very, very easy to do that. But we've been working very hard not to do that, but rather uh, put in place a very, very good foundation of leadership that is the kind of leadership that the Lord would want in place. So
Thanks, John.
no problem, Steve. Inti.
Hey, so I'm wondering because I know where I'm guessing they have limited resources, for in terms of theological resources, because commentaries and lexicons and logo software and all this stuff adds up really, really high in dollars, I'm sure. I don't know if English is like their one of their primary languages over there. Um, but you had even said at one point to me that they have like 40 languages over there. So I can imagine it can be pretty tough to become more and more biblical literate at first, I'm sure. But I'm wondering, based on because obviously God is working over there, He's working through the people over there. I'm wondering if there any of their practices or maybe specifically even their teachings has edified or taught you in something, or something we could all learn from. Like maybe there's something in scripture that someone pointed out to you that you had never really thought about before, or maybe there's a practice that really surprised you or that was different, you know? I'm just curious, is there anything like that that kind of sticks out or um, that we might be able to, that we could be edified by, or, just wondering if you're edified by anything in that kind of nature, those kind of things.
Well, okay, so this you asked a couple of different questions. The first is, I mean, they have the internet. They have, I mean, they do have access to online tools and things like that. But
Okay. Okay.
there is a definite need for English Bibles. They want English Bibles, and English is an official language of Uganda. They learn English in school, so most people are able to understand quite a bit of English, but the pastors are all people that almost all of them are speak English and can read English and things like that. But Bibles are hard to come by, and that's a need is English Bibles. Um, then I don't know, theologically, there's not. I can't think of anything that I thought, oh wow, I'd never really thought about that before. But there was one thing that was really, really interesting that I learned that Laban, that guy that I showed in that first picture, um, has been working on a solution for this that I definitely want our ministry to work with him to help solve this problem. In Uganda, if to get officially married, you have to get it done in a particular way. You have to get of an official government certificate, things like that. And the whole process is a little challenging and it's expensive. And that's not even counting if you live in a very traditional family where, the groom is going to have to basically pay for the bride. They explained that in more traditional families that typically if you want to marry one of their daughters, you're going to pay roughly the equivalent of about $10,000 for that. And they pay for it in cows and that sort of thing. And um, so it's very expensive. But even if you're not doing that, it's still really, really expensive. And so what happens is, it, for biblical Unitarians, the challenge is to have an official government license for a pastor to have an official authorization to sign licenses. They have to jump through all these hoops and get all this stuff set up and pay this money and all this kind of stuff. And it's challenging stuff. You have to have a degree and things like that. And for most of the pastors, they don't meet the qualifications, so they can't actually officially marry somebody. So what happens is you're going to have to go to a bigger, more traditional church. It's probably going to be like Church of Uganda, which is sort of a kind of Anglican church, and they're going to make you pay a lot of money. for it. You're gonna have all kinds of fees and stuff like that. So what happens is for most of them, they have what they call a church marriage, where the the pastor of the church that they're in marries them, but they, as far as the government is concerned, they are not officially married. And there are some it's as far as the government is concerned, and as far as the sort of social environment of the country is concerned, in many ways, they're not actually married. It was very confusing to me because I would keep getting I say take Moses Cuizo for instance, and his wife Goretti. I knew they were married. He would refer to her as his wife, but she has a different last name. And one of his questions for me was, "Are we going to have any kind of program where I can marry my wife?" And I'm like, marry your wife? What? She's your wife. Why do you need to marry her? You're already married, right? Did you did you go to church and get married? Yes, but we need to be married. And I'm like, I don't understand this. Well, eventually I understood. There's another Church of God pastor who came to the last couple of days. His name is Charles, and he really helped me to understand this problem. So Laban has gone through all the necessary processes to become officially licensed by the government to marry people. And what he wants to do with that is offer those services for free to Unitarians, so they don't have to go, pay through the nose in a Trinitarian church. So I think probably, especially, on the next trip out, or maybe even before that, setup where Laban can come and do a number of weddings, marriages, and make them official, as far as so like I forget Sister Goretti's last name, but she doesn't. Her last name is not Cuizo. She cannot take his name unless she's got this official document. And so one of the needs there, for all that. So that was definitely something that I really learned. I was like, oh wow, it made a bunch of stuff suddenly make sense. And but one of the needs is like even with Laban providing it for free, there's still going to be costs associated with it. The license itself is roughly about um oh, maybe $150 uh, for the license. And then Laban, he lives in Kampala, so getting to Eastern Uganda, it costs money. He's got to have a place to stay. He's got meals. He has a vehicle, but it's going to need, gas and stuff like that. And so there's definitely costs associated with that. I think one of the really nice things that we could do at large is put together a fund to help with these marriage certificates and stuff like that, to be a wedding gift, to pay for those things.
That's super cool. Is Laban one of the two guys from the UK, or that lives in the UK too? Or is Laban, did I have that confused?
No, that's just Tim, who lives part of the time Laban lives in Kampala.
Okay.
And he's associated with Spirit and Truth.
All right. Very cool.
Edgardo.
Yes, John. I love to see all these people. You have done
I,
great things
I
there.
so the whole time I was there, I was just, you know, I was just so, I don't know what the right word is, bummed that you weren't with me. I know you couldn't come because of the heart attack, but I would just so have loved to have you there with me.
Yes, John. Uh, there are wonderful people, John, and they are really a blessing to see them all. even in a picture and video, they are really an encouragement. It's good that God has led you to do that mission to visit them. At least we can continually broaden our horizon in the work of ministry. I thank God for your life. Thank you, John, for showing all those pictures to us. Congratulations. God bless you so much. God bless you more, John. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgardo.
Hey, John, while Edgardo is here, I had an idea about a uh, mobile library. Whereas what we would do is that we would get a suitcase and we would put 20 to 30 Bibles in that suitcase. And so wherever Eduardo went, if he went to the prison, he'd take the 30 Bibles with him. Or if he went to a different place, he would take the 30 Bibles with him and they would have the Bibles where they can use. And then we could start another Bible program in a different city with another suitcase with another 30 Bibles to where they can have it and they can use it as they will. Say, for instance, when he goes to the prison, instead of giving the prisoners the Bibles, he's going to take the Bibles there. They're going to use them and he's still going to have them. So he has a mobile library. And then, too, is that we have different people in our organization that write books. Suzanne writes, they could add to the Bible. We could put a concordance in there. And then they could start to check this material out and bring it back. And they can have a working uh, system with the Bible and some concordance and some written stuff that we are interjecting into our ministry.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
So what I would be willing to do is the first 20 Bibles and the suitcase. I mean, well, I would send the money to Eduardo, to whereas he would be able to buy it there because to try to get stuff here and then send it there is it's just too much.
Yeah, it's
But
hard.
set that system up to where he could do that and have that. So when he goes, he's got him a little mobile library. Or if Fiona goes, the library goes with her, or wherever. And how many other places or cities that we can set this up, that we can set this up. That was an idea.
Yeah, I think one of the things in Uganda that definitely I think would be, good to begin with is just making sure that all of the pastors have and assistant pastors. There's the pastors in a lot of the pictures. There's a core group of about 14 guys, but all in all, of all the A2K churches, there's about 60 pastors, including assistant pastors, and a lot of them don't have an English Bible, and the they say the problem with the Ateso Bibles is that the translations are not necessarily very good. Like if they're, an English reader and they do have an English Bible and they compare that to what they're reading in the Ateso Bible, they can tell this is not a very good translation. And so it's better for them to have an English Bible and then they can translate it into Ateso based upon what they're reading in the English Bible. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close out the recording. If you are, listening to this and you're not a part of what we're doing here, but you're an isolated biblical Unitarian, hop on that website and get in contact with us, and we'd love to get you all the information you need to join us. And God bless.